Okay, so I'm super excited to be with you guys this week, and I don't know if you've ever been to Move. It looked like last night a lot of you haven't been, so kind of how it works is I have the opportunity to get up here every morning and just set the plate a little bit. So just kind of here's something that we're talking about today. So we'll close the deal as the day goes on and kind of call you to some different kinds of action, but my job is simply to introduce the theme to you and to help you start to think things through so that you can open yourself up to whatever it is God may want to be saying to you throughout the day and ultimately throughout the week. I love to do it, and I'm particularly excited to be here doing it with you right now. I teach on this campus. This is home to me, and I'm glad to have you here with Move so that we can see what God does. Today, I want to think with you about a pretty simple but pretty important question. How do you know what something is? That's the question. So if you're looking at a thing and like you're wondering, is this A or B? How do you know if it's A or how do you know if it's B? What can you look at to try to determine if this thing is what you think it is or if it is what it's claiming to be? And to get ourselves warmed up a little bit and to get ourselves thinking through some of this, we're going to do some riddles, all right? So some people love riddles, some people hate riddles, but we're going to do a few riddles, not a lot, but a handful. Not like the what does the cow say, but something similar to that type of game that y'all played earlier, all right? So I need to do a little bit of a check real quick. Why don't you just show me, like by raise of hand, how many of you would say that you're kind of above average clever, right? Like your intelligence is higher than not. Okay, all right, about a quarter to half of the, that's probably how it should be statistically. We needed to do one more thing. We need to do a voice check. I need to make sure that you're capable of speaking back to me because this kind of requires you to talk out loud. So I'm going to count to 3, and then I want all of you to just say your name for me, all right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, very cool. Looks like that works. All right, so we got a few of these. Let's see if you can do these. Here's the first one. This should be easy if you're paying attention, okay? Riddle number 1. What is yours, but other people use it more than you do? Your name. Very good. All right, that's awesome. You either are a nerd like me and you look at riddles online, or you put that together really quickly. All right, here's the second one. We'll see if you can get this one. All right, pay close attention. David's dad has 3 sons, Snap, Crackle, and... not Pop, although that was the same guy. Yeah, David's dad has 3 sons. Okay, there's that one. Here's another one. There's a lot of answers to this one, actually. Okay, third one. Can you name 3 consecutive days without using Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? I'm hearing it. There you go. There's actually like 367 answers to this question. Like you could be lame like January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. But really it's, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Here's one that's a little tricky. This is almost like dad joke territory, so you can roll your eyes if you need to. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years? You guys are geeks that look at riddles online. I love this. You're my people. All right, this is one that everybody should get. It's not even hard, but it's what we're driving to together. If it looks like a duck and swims like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. No, a duck. It was not a trick question. So this is called the duck test, right? Like if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, it's probably a duck. Now, it's not about a duck, right? Unless you're hunting, I guess. But it's this thing that we do. It's this saying that we have. Actually has its own Wikipedia page. And the basic idea is pretty simple. If you want to know what something is, look at its characteristics. If you want to discover like what it is that you're looking at, pay close attention and ask, well, what I'm looking at does this, this, and this, so what does that tell me that it is? It works fairly well every time. Like, so how do you know that someone is a good friend? Well, if they care for me like a good friend, and if they have my back like a good friend, and if they tell the truth to me no matter what like a good friend, then they're probably a good friend. Like, how do you know someone is a good man? Well, does he take responsibility for things, and is he courageous in telling the truth, and does he care for people who are weaker than him? If so, you're talking about a good man. Like, it's a simple test. But sometimes it's more complicated. It's kind of notoriously difficult to try to figure out, like, good art from bad art, It's hard to know what is it that we're looking for. Now, sometimes even with art, it's fairly simple. Take a look at this picture real quick. This is, like, unquestionably bad art, okay? Now, this is a picture actually belongs to my little brother. When he was a student at this college, he put this picture up in his dorm room because it was his honesty check. It was his poser check, all right? So he put it up in there knowing that it's hideously ugly so that if anybody walked in and they were like, oh, that's really interesting, I love what they're doing with the light, then he'd know that they were totally full of themselves and just trying to look smarter than they were. As a general rule, if it's got wobbly eyes, it's not good art, right? Like that's how it works. How do you know what something is? Sometimes it's easy, like, is this a working lamp? Now we know. So here's the question. Like, how do you know you're a Christian? Or how do you know, maybe that's a loaded word for you, but I think you know what I mean. How do you know someone is a follower of Jesus? And as we think about this question, let's engage our text. 1 John, if you have your Bibles, open them up. You may not be able to see real well, but you can catch it a little bit. You can look on your phones if you want to. And if you're new to the Bible, by the way, don't feel dumb just because you don't know how it works. Everybody learns sometime. The Bible's made up of 66 different pieces of literature. We call them books that God inspired to be written over the course of thousands of years, and then he guided this to be collected in a book that has one single message. And so when we talk about books of the Bible, you can just flip to the table of contents, look toward the very end, and you'll find 1 John. So we call 1 John, turn to the page number, and we're going to be reading a little bit from 1 John. Now as you turn there, let me talk to you a bit about what's happening when this letter was written. You already know that John is a guy who was a follower of Jesus, and he was much younger, like actually with Jesus when he was alive. And then as he grew older, he led churches, and in this one area, he was kind of the leader of those who followed Jesus. But then something happened. There was a group that broke off. There was a group of other teachers and people who separated themselves from John and the rest of the Christians, and they said, we're actually the true church, and what we believe is the truth, and what we do is what you're supposed to do, and you should leave what you've been doing and come with us. And this put the people that John loved in a position of anxiety, because they're trying to figure this out, like which group should we be a part of? Should we stay where we've always been, or should we go with these people doing this new thing? And John writes the letter we call 1 John to give them confidence that they are where they're supposed to be. He says, you can know that you're in Christ. You can know that you're living as God would have you live. And here's how. And we're going to unpack all week long what John says about how to know whether you're in or out. So I want to look at a couple of verses together today. We're going to focus our attention actually on 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 through 11. But I want to get a running start by looking at a couple other verses as we get closer to it. So 1 John, first of all, chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. It'll come on the screens if you can't see it all. Here's what he says early on in his letter. He says, this is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. So if we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. That's a pretty strong statement. So you can see that we're working with this theme, this contrast between light and darkness. So light is a metaphor for what is good and of God. Darkness is a metaphor for what's outside of God or not good. And God is 100% light. So if you're walking with him, then you'll be characterized by light. And if you say you're walking with him, but you're not characterized by light, you're not telling the truth. Look down a little bit later at chapter 2, verses 3 and following. He says, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we're in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. And we're going to unpack that verse later on tonight, but I wanted to read it to set us up for the specific thing that John says next. Here's our text for the morning. 1 John chapter 2, verses 7 through 11. Dear friends, I am not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you have had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard. Yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother or sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them. How do you know you're walking in the light? That's the question that we need to raise this morning. That's the question really that 1 John is a little bit obsessed with. And he gives us these tests as we go throughout the letter. He'll talk about the belief tests. What do you believe? Are you believing things that Christians have always believed? Are you believing the things that Jesus taught his apostles about who he was and what he did? And then they'll give us the life test, like are you obeying? How are you living your life? Are you doing the things that God says to do? And then this third one is the specific one. It's the love test. Are you loving one another as God has commanded you? And today we're focused on this love test. We can measure the quality of any person's faith by examining the quality, the genuineness of their love. Like whether or not you love God is revealed by how you treat people. Your worship of God and its strength is tested by whether you're willing to lay down your life for the people in front of you. Let's put it in terms of our text. We'll put this real simple so we can remember it all day. Your light is proven by your love. Everybody say light. Everybody say love. Your light is proven by your love. That's what John is saying to us. And don't miss the light metaphor. It's not just a prop. It's kind of interesting to think about the way the Bible talks about light. And part of why it seems somewhat different is because they thought about light a little bit differently than we do. Like, we understand that light is something that exists outside of my body, and it reflects on something. And then my eyes, or your eyes, look at what the light is reflecting on, and you can see it. That's how light and eyes and sight work. In the ancient world, they had a different theory about the way light worked. Many people believed that light was actually inside you, behind your eyes. And so the quality of the light actually determined whether or not you could see. And so if you have nastiness inside of you, then it's going to result in nastiness outside of you. And that's the point that John is making here. How you act toward what is in front of you is the best measure for what is going on inside of you. So your light is proven by your love. But love is not a word that defines itself either. Like, we use the same word love to describe our feelings for moms and memes and marshmallows. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just all these things. I love this, I love that, I love you, you love me. So let's talk about love. And I think we probably understand that when we talk about love, we generally mean, are you willing to do good for someone? Are you going to look out for them? But John ups this a little bit because his definition of love looks at the cross. And for John, love is a willingness to suffer for the good of another person. Specifically, a willingness to suffer to bring somebody else closer to God. I love to read history and to find stories of the love that I see when I look at Jesus. And one of my favorite stories about this German Christian named Dirk, lived a couple hundred years ago. And he lived at a time when it wasn't very popular or easy to be a follower of Jesus. Matter of fact, it was illegal. And he knew when he was at home that there were some soldiers coming to arrest him and to put him on trial. And he was going to say, yes, I'm a Christian, and they were going to kill him. And so he sees the soldiers coming, and he takes off running. Middle of the winter, takes off running. And so this soldier takes off after him. And he's running through the forest, and he's moving bushes around, and he's cutting his legs, but he doesn't care because he's trying to stay alive. And as he runs through the forest, he comes on this pond, and it's frozen over, and he runs across the pond. And the soldier chases him. And just as he gets to the edge of the pond, and he's in safety, he realizes, because he hears this noise behind him, that the soldier chasing him has fallen in the ice and is about to go down under it into the water. And in this moment, Dirk has a choice. He can, of course, continue running to safety and keep his life, or he can turn around and help the man who will probably put him to death. And he, in that moment, heard the voice of Jesus say, don't forget what I did for you. And he turned around and he walked back and he helped out of the icy water the very soldier who would execute him 48 hours later. That's love. Now, I know that that's an extreme example, and the chances of you finding yourself in a situation like that are probably pretty small, at least for a while. So let's maybe bring it a little bit closer to home. Because love isn't just the great big things, it's also the little things. Love might be as simple as walking into the cafeteria and choosing a seat based on who looks like they need somebody to sit next to them. Love is not walking into the cafeteria and choosing a seat based on what's going to make you look better in the eyes of your peers. Love might be listening to an old man tell the same story again, or actually paying attention to someone in your youth group when they're sharing their pain. Love is not pulling out your phone every time you get bored with the people in front of your face. Love might be something as simple as cleaning up your room because mama asks you to, or giving up your Starbucks because somebody in your class needs a little bit of money for some warm clothes, or holding your tongue when somebody makes fun of you and you know you could get back at them but you don't. That might be what love looks like for you. And love is not whenever you decide to say and do and spend whatever you want to say and do and spend because it's just what you want to do. Can I speak to the young men for just a moment? Like, love, the kind of love that we're talking about, is when you treat young women in ways that contribute to and build up the value that God has placed on their life. It is not love when you pursue a girl just because you know having her on your arm is going to make you look good. Or when you try to get her to do things with you so that you can get over your insecurities and feel like a man. And can I speak to the young ladies for a moment? Love is when you're good to your friends all the time and when you're also good to those who aren't your friends. Love is not, have you ever done this? When you use your words to cut down another girl so that you don't have to feel as small as you did from the start. How do you talk to people who you think are beneath you on the popularity scale? How do you talk to people who are above you in positions of authority? Have you ever, any of you, like pulled back from an old friendship for the sake of a new, better, cooler friendship? When you see someone in need at your church, whether you know them or not, what do? Do you move forward automatically, or do you walk away and act like you didn't see it? You know what I think? I don't think we love nearly as well as we think we do. I think we love selectively. I think we love our people. I think we love some people, right? Whether it's the people who look like me, or maybe it's the people who don't, but we love some people, and then we remind ourselves, we remember the times that we do love so that we can forget and ignore the times that we don't love. You, not you. Them, not them. I think some of you, man, you have a passion for some important things, like orphans in Africa and whether or not people have clean water. And I think those things are awesome. Don't hear me knocking them. But how about the person who sits next to you in algebra class? Like, what's going on with them? How about the persons that's 3 seats to your left right now? What's going on with them? I think we love selectively. And I think we tell ourselves that we love better than we actually do. I think many of us walk around like we're the center of the story. And we tell ourselves that we care about people, but honestly, sometimes we're just using them. I think we walk around like the star, and everybody else is just supporting cast. Man, I was sitting where you are, and it doesn't feel like that long ago. I mean, I know it was 20 years ago, actually, but it doesn't feel like that long ago. And I remember being there, and I remember thinking about what God was doing in my life. And if you want me to be honest, I avoided most of the big sins. I avoided most of the things that's embarrassing to share. Man, some of my favorite memories happened at Move, but also some of my greatest regrets. And I was praying about this earlier. I don't even know if this will resonate with you or not, but I still remember, seriously, probably my worst regret, and I did some stupid things, some things that you might think are worse, but my worst regret from high school happened at CIY. And I remember I had this group of friends, and we were homies, and we would always go places together, and we'd go to the main service, and we'd go to the other things. And there was this one other guy who was sort of tagging along our group, and he wasn't very cool, and we didn't really like him, and we sort of spent the whole week kind of lightly avoiding him and not including him in some of these different things. And I still remember this one time, I think it was Thursday night, so it was toward the end of the week. Like, we were actually preparing to go to the main session. We were literally going over to worship God and to celebrate all that he'd been doing in our lives that week. And I remember we coordinated this when we were in our rooms at the dorm, so that he wouldn't know when we left, so that we could leave without him knowing and walk over to worship God without him tagging along with us the whole time. Man, sometimes I find this dude on Facebook just to make sure he's still okay. And I know he's not the only one. He may be the one I remember, but he's not the only one. And when I think about how we sometimes treat people, the fact is we start to treat people like they're things, like this lamp. Like, when I need the light, it's on. When I don't need it, it's off. When I need it again, it's on. And it's okay for a lamp because a lamp is a thing, but that's not how we were made to treat people. Most of y'all probably know the drill at some level. When you come to Move, or when you come to a camp like this, you kind of realize that at a certain point, your crap's going to get called out. You know what I mean? Like, the junk in your life, is somebody's going to ask you to confess it and get rid of it. And some of you, like, come in and you're ready. Like, you're tired of bearing the burden of your sin and you want to let it go. Others of you are still not sure. Maybe you're even planning on hiding it. I don't know where you are with respect to some of those things, but I would imagine that for a lot of you, there are some things that you're not even thinking about because they're not on your radar. When we think about confessing our sins and dealing with the junk that's going on in our lives, typically we think about the kind of stuff that gets us in trouble with the rules. You know what I'm saying? Like substances. Do you do drugs? Do you drink too much? All these various things. And do you do things with girls or with guys that you shouldn't be doing? Do you look at pornography? Some of these big things. And those are big things. Don't hear me saying that they're not. They matter, and they matter deeply, and we want to deal with that stuff. But I think that there are probably a decent amount of you in here who think of sin as those things, and you don't think about the fact that most of your interactions with other people are geared toward how you can get them to do what you want them to do for you. Maybe you think this is small. It's not. So here's the inconvenient truth. Most of us don't love as well as we think. Most of us have darker hearts than we care to admit. Did you notice in that text how John talks about this whole like old command, new command thing? Like, I'm giving you an old command, but I've got a new command. And he's talking about the same command. Like, I got this old command, guys, love one another. But I also got this new command, guys, love one another. It's really weird and kind of confusing. Why is he doing this? And I think he's doing this because he wants to wake us up a little bit. Because it says, hey, I got this old command, love each other. And we're like, oh yeah, we got that, like we're good. And he's like, no, I got a new one for you, love one another. And we're like, yeah, no, we got that, John, we understand that, we're good. And I think John's looking at us saying, are you? Really? And look, I get it. This is kind of personal for this early in the week. We wrestle with this every year. I wrestle with this tension every year. It's day 2, morning 1. We haven't even had a chance to meet. I don't even know most of you. And here I am trying to tell you to expose the darkness in your hearts. Who am I to say this? Why should you give me a voice in your life? That's what I would be asking if I were sitting where you're sitting. And I would probably be trying to do whatever I could so that I could push this message back and not take seriously the fact that maybe I need to confront the ugly truth about myself. But if you want to get to a better place in life, if you want to get to where you want to go, then you have to be honest about where you're starting. And this is true if you're learning a new instrument or learning a new sport or starting a new relationship or maybe starting a new job. And it's also true with life as a whole. You got to confront the brutal facts. Brutal fact, none of us like exposing the darkness that hides within our heart. Brutal fact, most of us don't love as well as we think. The quality of your worship and the genuineness of your faith can be demonstrated in this, the depth of your love. I mean, if it walks like a duck and swims like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So are you a Christian? Are you a follower of Jesus? Are you walking in the light? How do you know?